All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Off the Bench. This is episode 12. This is our first live episode before we were taping our broadcasts and then sending them over to YouTube. But we are live for the first time. Let me introduce myself, Kevin Cornegay, and my colleagues, my partners. We got Mr. Dallas Cowboy himself, New York Yankee, and all things LeBron James, Sean Dustin. And then we have Mr. Michigan Wolverine, Pittsburgh Steeler, and Sacramento King, Javon Tavares. Fellas, we've been off for a couple of weeks. How you guys been?
Blessed, blessed. Cannot complain. Enjoying family. Working, making it happen, and just enjoying a lot of great sporting events that have happened. We have a lot to catch up on.
We
How you
do.
been, Flo?
Do.
How you been, Javon?
I've been good. Antsy for the football season to start. It's my favorite time of the year. Coincides with my favorite season, autumn. So, just excited. Just excited. We had a game tonight. We're gonna have some games this weekend. So I'm ready.
All
I'm ready.
right. Let's get started quickly. I want to go on record and saying before the season start, I told somebody I thought that the champions, New England, would be 16 and 0 by the time they got to the playoffs, and that is in serious jeopardy. They are down 2 touchdowns right now to Kansas City. Tonight was opening night, and they unveiled the new banner, championship banner. That's 5 for New England. They got their rings tonight, but they did not show up. So it looks like Kansas City is going to get the victory on the road. So that's a big time win for Andy Reid,
Huge.
Alex
Huge.
Smith. So let's jump right
Let-
into the show, fellas. Uh, so 2 weeks ago, we're going to backtrack just a little bit because I really wanted to get this topic in. We had a big time fight took place in Las Vegas, Nevada at the T-Mobile Center, and we saw Floyd Money Mayweather finish off his illustrious career at 50 and 0, stopping Conor McGregor in round 10. Now remember, the notorious Conor McGregor was coming over from the MMA and wanted to try his hand in the boxing ring and collect on that payday. And Floyd Money Mayweather, to say the least, gave him a boxing lesson worth 10 rounds. So I wanted to start off with you, Javon. Floyd Money Mayweather in the fight. Did you see what you expected to see, number one? And number two, how did Conor McGregor show himself in his first boxing match?
So to answer your first question, I think Money Mayweather did exactly what I knew he was going to do. There were some MMA fans and there were some skeptics of Floyd Mayweather that thought he wouldn't be able to handle Connor's power. And I think the fight was evident that boxing punching power is light years different from MMA power. Now, with that said, Conor McGregor is a great fighter. He's a great MMA fighter. I thought he acquitted himself well in the first couple rounds. Clearly, his ability to switch stances and his awkward southpaw stance, coupled with switching into an orthodox stance, gave Mayweather a little problems in terms of him figuring them out. But if you take a look at the epilogue of All Access on Showtime, you could clearly see that Floyd Mayweather had given away the first 3 rounds. It was part of the game plan that he and his father, Floyd Mayweather Sr., had derived, and you could see him basically saying to the camera, and I don't know if he was talking directly to the camera, but as he's going back to his corner after round 3, he said, "It's time." That also coupled with the fact that he tried to bet on himself at the sports book for I think a ninth round stoppage or a 10th round stoppage. Now it becomes really clear that Floyd Mayweather uh, could have taken Conor McGregor out a little bit sooner if he wanted to. But give Conor credit. I think he acquitted himself well. MMA should be happy with his ability to step in with a legend. But Floyd Money Mayweather is one of the greatest of all time. And one of the things that people didn't think he'd be able to do was bully Conor McGregor, ladies and gentlemen. That's what happened. He literally bullied Conor McGregor, a gentleman who's 11 years younger, 22, 23 pounds bigger. He bullied him around the ring and beat him from pillar to post. And for those of you that said that you didn't think it was a sufficient stoppage, well, look no further than a professional in the medical field saying that Conor McGregor was suffering from a concussion, which is why he was grabbing and falling all over the ring, not because he was tired. He had a concussion. So it could have been a lot worse.
Sean, let's go to you. Same question. Did the fight go as you expected it would? And then give me a little bit of insight on how you think Conor McGregor looked for the first time being in the boxing ring.
Um, First and foremost, I think the fight absolutely went the way that I thought it would initially. I thought that Floyd would walk him down. I thought that Floyd would not be at all afraid of his inside work in comparison to other great fighters that he's willingly fought inside. Floyd is a great body puncher. He's known for fighting inside. He's good at using his leverage, getting you off of him with a forearm, hitting you with the other hand, hitting you right under the guard that he just pushed you off with. He has a lot of guile. He has a lot of skill. And Conor McGregor, I'm not going to be as complimentary. He had zero punching power from a guy who's talked about, I'm going to beat him within the first couple of rounds, especially if we use 8-ounce gloves. He had no leverage on his punches. He did not know how to properly throw and execute a boxing punch. I felt that as a fighter and as the will and the intent and the grit, as instincts, I think were there as far as being willing to exchange. You could see that he was trying to execute a game plan. He had an almost perfect placed uppercut early on that Floyd was able to smother and take away any power from it. And it was a technician giving a lesson. Simple as that. I echo the sentiments of Javon. He definitely gave the first couple of rounds. He wasn't trying to throw punches. He was trying to intimidate Conor McGregor. Like, I know you're going to come forward. I know you're going to try to destroy me. You're going to feel how strong I am in the clinch. You're going to understand that I know how to frame and I know how to roll off and parry punches. Nothing's going to land clean. You're going to expend a lot of energy. And then once you start fatiguing, I'm going to start taking full advantage, pot shotting you, hitting you with clean punches, moving you around the ring, taking the fight to the center of the ring. And he ultimately not only concussed, but fatigued and had a bewildered Conor McGregor stumbling, trying to hold on for dear life, trying to hug him and do all sorts of things, hold him from the back, slow dance, everything. He didn't know where he was. He was discombobulated. It was embarrassing. I don't think MMA should be proud. I think they understand as fighters that he got controlled and dictated to the terms of how they were going to fight, when the fight was going to end.
I think Sean, did the connection freeze up? I think so.
What
Flo,
we
let me
call
ask
technical.
you. Yeah,
Yes.
technical difficulties. We're live. We'll move on. Flo, 15 years from now, when we hear the name Floyd Money Mayweather, talk about legacy. What are we going to be saying about him 15 years from now when we hear that name?
Well, I can tell you this, 15 years from now, the name Floyd Money Mayweather is going to be much more appreciated than it will now. You have to remember that Muhammad Ali was an individual that he took the world by storm with his stance and not wanting to go to serve in the armed forces for a war that he didn't believe in. And part of that was affiliated with his religion. So the same people that laud Muhammad Ali for being the greatest of all time, some of those individuals at the time maybe didn't necessarily agree with what Ali was doing. But as history shows, and as revisionist history is written, Muhammad Ali is now the greatest. And so a lot of people didn't like, scores of people didn't like Floyd Money Mayweather, but you have to appreciate his ability to do things with the sweet science of boxing that very few have been able to do. Now, the 50-0 record, some may question it. They may question the merits of Conor McGregor as a boxer, but we're talking about 50-0. I'm pretty sure in his first 5, 10 fights, there were some fighters that weren't as good as Conor McGregor, and I don't care how many professional fights they had. Conor McGregor is a world-class fighter, albeit in a different combat sport. So I believe Floyd Money Mayweather will get his credit in due time. I think some of the heat will have cooled off from some of the hate that and vitriol that he's received throughout the years. And listen, you have to give the guy credit. You can say what you want to say about his antics, his shenanigans, and his lifestyle outside the ring, but I think he's matured from that. I think you see a more humble Floyd Mayweather, someone who is appreciative of the levels that he's ascended to, someone who appreciates family, and someone that acknowledges the mistakes that he's made. Now, that won't be good enough for some people, but it is what it is. But I think Floyd Money Mayweather will go down as one of the definitely the top boxer of his generation. But pound for pound, he'll be considered in top 5, top 10 all time.
Javon, before I go to Sean, we got Sean back. Uh, who who are your top two boxers of all time, Javon? Or can you even break it down to top two, or do you have a top two list? Just two.
It's more like a top 5, but I'll give you my two favorite boxers of all time. Floyd Money Mayweather is definitely in the top two, and then the great Sweet Pea Pernell Whitaker. Before the crack cocaine really derailed his career, he was a sight to behold. He was a guy that was a southpaw. He was a defensive wizard, and he was a guy that could make you pay. He knew how to control range and distance with being only 5'6". He was a guy that was had enough of a punch to make his opponents respect him, and he arguably has one of the most impressive draws that you'll ever see in your life. That was the draw that should have been a victory over Julio Cesar Chavez and Senior, that is. That was really a fight that not many people thought that Pernell Whitaker could win or control the fight because Chavez was just brutalizing people at that point. But he made Chavez look like he shouldn't even been in the same ring. So that's my personal preference. I like boxers that really embody all the tools that are necessary to be successful with the sweet science. So I really like Mayweather and Sweet Pea Pernell Whitaker as my two favorites.
Sean, let me ask you, 15 years from now, when we hear the name Floyd Money Mayweather, what are we going to be saying about him? Talk about his legacy.
Money. I think when you think about Floyd Money Mayweather, people are going to think about extravagant lifestyle, a cocky, arrogant fighter who didn't mind sharing his opinions, surrounded in controversy at times, an excellent defensive boxer, and a Hall of Fame boxer. That's unfortunately what I think people are going to talk about. What I'm more concerned with talking about is having every attribute that was necessary to be an outstanding prize fighter. I'm talking about the intangibles, hard work, determination. He embodies that. Never had bad habits outside of the ring as far as making weight or not being prepared. He was hyper prepared. He was a gym rat. He was somebody that would put in the road work, would put in the sparring, would put his body through the ringer famed 30, 40 round sparring matches. This is somebody who didn't mind digging deep and fighting gritty at times. He liked fighting inside. Underrated body puncher, underrated jab when he wanted to use it. Some of the best ring generalship I've ever seen displayed. Controlled distance, brought you closer, but not just brought you closer to hold, but to control how he wanted to punch you to the body at the clinch, invite you to the ropes, use your leverage against you. There was nobody better at that. Outstanding in the clinch, and he has a repertoire and a body of work that you automatically say Hall of Fame. When you think about what makes a fighter great comprehensively, you think amateur career, decorated amateur career, Olympic medalist, and champion. And then you start talking about multiple weight classes. When you talk about De La Hoya, when you talk about Sugar Ray Leonard, when you talk about Muhammad Ali, when you talk about George Foreman, when you talk about Roy Jones Jr., all of these people were decorated, if not robbed, Olympians. They were decorated amateur career, and then they were consummate professionals. And Floyd Money Mayweather, people can say anything they want about who he fought. You have to beat champions to be a champion. And you have to beat champions in multiple weight classes to be a multi weight class winning champion. I think was it 6-7 weight classes that he had championship belts in. And not now we start talking about being transcendent. Now we talk about taking the throne from an Oscar De La Hoya, going from a B fighter to an A fighter, and beating someone on the biggest stage, and beat those fighters convincingly. He didn't just beat them, he beat them convincingly, as if they shouldn't have been in the same ring. And so when you talk about the numbers, CompuBox numbers, how little he was hit, how accurate and pinpoint his punches were, even fighting with broken hands, and after his hands got broken, not being able to fight as assertively and load up on punches the same way. But it's just like how Jordan reinvented himself. He reinvented his style. And even though he got at an accelerated age and he lost some of his reflexes in the ring and not being quite as fast, he was still significantly faster and quicker reflexes than any of his opponent. My top two boxers all time, Sugar Ray Robinson and Sugar Ray Robinson is number one for me, and Muhammad Ali. Those are my favorite. I think Sugar Ray Robinson, during the era that he fought, the fighters that he fought, the trilogies that he had, outstanding body puncher, great jab, a great hook, great overhand right. If he sees that you're in trouble, he's going to annihilate you. Quick, great footwork. And again, fighting every other month, once a month at times, twice and 3 times in 2 months. Ridiculous work ethic, and became transcendent and endeared himself to the people. And even in an era where racism was prevalent, he was well liked, even by white people and different cultures. And Muhammad Ali, I mean, I don't even think we need to even elaborate on that. I mean, he was Muhammad Ali. So,
right.
And Cassius Clay, what a beautiful boxer. So those are my top two all time.
Normally,
Kev,
go ahead.
Kev, let me ask you who your two favorite boxers
That's
of
where I
all
was about to
time were.
My favorite boxers of all time were Sugar Ray Leonard.
Great pick.
It was during his fights. That's when I first started watching boxing. It was Sugar Ray Leonard fights on ABC Sports.
Wide World of Sports?
Yeah, Wide World of Sports. So I started watching Sugar Ray Leonard fights, and then Tyson fights would come on. So I came into the boxing game a little later, but it would be Sugar Ray Leonard and Roy Jones Jr.
Hard to leave Roy off my list. It really is.
Right. It just
almost cried when he got knocked out by Tarver in their second fight. That was the closest I ever came to crying over a boxing loss.
Right.
I thought he was actually in danger.
Right.
Oh, he was in danger.
Yeah, he was.
His soul was in danger.
Yeah, at his first Tarver fight, he was in some big trouble. But something I always loved watching speed, hand speed.
Mm.
Way those guys, their hand speed, and then they had the power too.
Mm-hmm.
So those would be my two favorite boxers. Normally, what we do is we save this segment for the end of the show. Our on the bench segment. This is when we see something during the week that just doesn't make sense to us, and we put either a player, a coach, maybe fans. We place them on the bench because they need a timeout. And so I'm going to get to that segment right now because it involves putting one of us on the bench. And I hate to do this, but I'm a guy who has no problem looking myself in the mirror and telling myself when I messed up. So I'm placing myself, Kevin Cornegay, on the bench this week. And it's for my continued disrespect of Floyd Money Mayweather. I was watching this fight, and after every round passed and ended, I found myself becoming sad because this was going to be the last time I would ever be able to watch this magician in the ring. Floyd Money Mayweather is one of the greatest I've ever seen. Is he my favorite boxer? No. But I admit I have allowed his personal transgressions to cloud my judgment of what this man is in the boxing ring. And what he is in the boxing ring is absolute perfection. We always talk about nobody's perfect. No one's perfect. Jesus is the only one that's perfect, so on and so forth. And that's true. But Floyd Money Mayweather, he's 50-0. He's never been defeated in the boxing ring.
Mm.
50 up, 50 down. He's done it every way you can imagine. The distance, stoppage, brutal knockouts, Ricky Hatton. Whatever it is that you needed, Floyd Mayweather provided, especially in that ring. Salute to Floyd Money Mayweather. A tremendous career, a career that I did not give myself a chance to appreciate. And it's that saying that says, you don't appreciate anything until it's gone.
Till it's gone.
And I
Yeah.
found myself after I watched him raise his hands for the 50th time in 50 tries, sad that I would never be able to see that man walk in the ring again. So salute, Floyd Money Mayweather. You're one of the all-time greats. I place myself firmly on the bench. Let's go ahead and move on. Football. The NFL started tonight. Kansas City with the upset victory over the world champion Patriots. They got their rings tonight. And Alex Smith and Andy Reid roll into Foxborough or Gillette Stadium and get the victory. We got some big-time games coming up this weekend. I think the news of the weekend is going to involve America's team, Sean Dustin's team, the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Ezekiel Elliott will be able to suit up this weekend versus the New York Giants, but after this game, he will be suspended. The suspension was upheld. It'll be 6 games after the week 1 games. Now, the question that I have, and we're going to start with Mr. Dallas Cowboy himself, Sean Dustin. The 6-game suspension, first of all, did you agree with the suspension? If you did not, was there any amount of games that would have satisfied you? If you do agree with the suspension, and we don't have to discuss that part of it. And the second, where will the Cowboys be when Ezekiel Elliott is able to return, record-wise?
First, I'll address how I feel about the decision. I want to start off by saying I think domestic violence is one of the biggest social ills we have. I think it's deplorable. I don't at all condone women hitting men, men hitting women, men hitting men, women hitting women, any kind of domestic violence situation. So I definitely understand the severity and why the league would obviously is hyper vigilant about protecting their brand and making sure that acts such as domestic violence and uh, violence towards the opposite sex or same sex is not going to be tolerated. Now that I've said that, I have a lot more to say. The NFL and its history of dropping the ball on cases that involve domestic violence has increased by one after this rendering, after the suspension was upheld by the foolhardy Mr. Harold. I'm going to say this. In this case, we had an accuser that was inconsistent with her testimony to law enforcement officers. It came out that she talked even about race, about you're a black male athlete. I'm a white female. Who are they going to believe?
Mm.
Talked about blackmailing him by putting out sex tapes. Eyewitnesses say that there wasn't violence there. The lead investigator, the NFL's lead investigator, who happens to be a woman, who happens to probably be sensitive to domestic violence issues, not only in her capacity as an NFL lead investigator, but as a female in America. This person did their thorough research and is the only person to have actually interviewed the accuser. And her recommendation would have been zero punishment, zero games, because of the lack of credibility of the accuser, because of the facts, because of destroyed evidence and eyewitness accounts. And for the league to uphold a 6-game suspension with these kind of inconsistencies, and to boot, this person who actually conducted the interview and is the lead investigator was not involved in the decision-making process when it came to disciplinary action. So there's a lot of inconsistencies, and that's why the Cowboys have sued, and that's why the players union has obviously appealed, and while he would ultimately get to play in Game 1. With that being said, Ezekiel Elliott, all reports have been that he's very focused. I see them winning the first game. I see them going 4-2 in the 6 games. I see them possibly losing to the Packers. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but the Giants game could go either way. They always play us tough. We had 2 games last year decided by less than 5 points collectively, and they have a stout defensive line. They're good against the run, and they've improved some in the offseason, but our offensive line, I think, may ultimately be enough to control the game, wear them down late, gouge them with some big runs at the end, and control the middle of the field with tight end play and passes to Ezekiel Elliott in mid to intermediate range.
Javon, same question to you as far as the Ezekiel Elliott suspension. Do you think it was founded? Do you agree with the suspension or not? And where do the Cowboys end up after when Ezekiel Elliott comes back?
So, in the current climate that we're living in, I feel the need to repeat the same disclaimer that Sean gave. A lot of these things can spin out of control, and you can find yourself in a position where people are accusing you of supporting an act such as domestic violence
Mm.
if you don't state that position initially. So, much like what Sean said, I don't support domestic violence. I do think it's deplorable. And I think the league was in a position because of their inability to get things like this right in the past. They were in a position where they had to overreact.
Mhm.
And the Ray Rice situation stands out in my mind as the reason why they have to do this. The big difference between the two situations is obviously Ray Rice's case was caught on camera, and apparently the NFL offices had that video, and they didn't necessarily make the right decision to suspend him and give him the appropriate amount of games initially. So the NFL had to backpedal with that. Roger Goodell came out and said, well, I don't know if we actually had the tapes in house, but then another representative says, well, no, the tape was in house. So I think at that point the NFL made the choice to overreact and deal with that fallout as opposed to underreacting and then dealing with the fallout of seeing a video like the Ray Rice video. But again, I agree with Sean here. If you have an investigator that investigates the case and they come back and say no suspension, if you have police that don't file charges,
Mm,
in my mind, there should not have been a suspension. So I can see why Jerry Jones was upset. I can see why the Cowboys nation and organization is upset. But again, because of the way the NFL mishandled situations in the past pertaining to domestic violence, that is your classic overreaction. It's very similar to a basketball official that misses a call. On one end, maybe he misses a travel. On the next end, to make it up, he'll call a charge on that same person. The NFL effectively called a charge after they misstepped and traveled with the Ray Rice situation. So I don't think that Ray Rice, or excuse me, Ezekiel Elliott should have gotten that suspension. But moving on to the matchup this weekend, this has been one of the more interesting rivalries in the NFL. And
yes.
it's interesting because you really can flip a coin to determine who's going to win a game. There's been times when I thought that the Dallas Cowboys, particularly under the Tony Romo era, I thought that they had an advantage going into games, and Eli Manning and his Giants come down to Jerry's World and they get a victory on opening night. So
Mm.
they're games that they're usually played closely, but in this case, I think we need to factor in Odell Beckham Jr.'s health. If Odell Beckham Jr. can play, and from what I hear, he's questionable, it's a good chance he
Questionable,
may
all right.
not. What was that?
He's questionable, all right.
It's not like you don't have a bias or anything, Sean.
uh,
It's not like you don't have a cowboy bias here. But
I think Odell
I
Beckham
think
Jr. is a great player.
I think if Odell Beckham Jr. plays, I think the combination of him, Brandon Marshall, and Sterling Shepard, I think they'll be able to get some things done, and maybe the home field advantage works out for them, even with the Cowboys having Ezekiel Elliott in the lineup. If Odell Beckham Jr. doesn't play, then I think the Cowboys will win this opener, and I don't think it'll even be as close as 10 points. I would have them winning by maybe 14 points, maybe two touchdowns.
that's Cowboys.
Eli Manning has been known to lay an egg or two from time to time, and I think if Dak Prescott can build on what he started last year, if he can prove that last year wasn't a fluke and that now he's advanced in his progressions and his reads, I think the Cowboys have the requisite offensive line. They have Zeke Elliott, they have Des Bryant, they have Jason Witten. I think they go up to the Giants Stadium, and I think they get the job done.
Gotcha. The NFL, they were right to suspend Ezekiel Elliott, but they wrote the wrong reason. He
Mm,
only should have gotten 2 games, 2 to 3 games at the most, and it should have been for the other transgressions that he's had over the last year,
there you go. So the
not
lifting, the lifting
for
of the lifting of the shirt of the maybe the lady at Mardi Gras,
all of
those
those
type
things.
things,
Yes,
personal
yes.
conduct
Personal
violation.
conduct violations as opposed to domestic violence. We know he's suspended for domestic violence because that's
Mm,
automatic 6 game suspension.
mm,
So if the NFL, if Roger Goodell comes out and says, we're just going to give you the first 2 weeks off, okay, for conduct detrimental to the league, for all of these transgressions combined, I think everybody wins in that situation. I think the Cowboys would be fine with that. Jerry Jones would have been fine with that. Obviously, Ezekiel Elliott would have been fine with that. I even think that, well, I don't want to speak, on that person's behalf, but I think that everybody would have been satisfied with that. Okay, quick 2 games, conduct detrimental, so on and so forth. But now you overextend and you go the full 6 games. Now we really need to dig in and see, okay, what really went on during the investigation. I will say this: it took them a year to conduct the investigation, so at least it wasn't a rush job that was done. As far as the game over the weekend, I have the Cowboys winning in impressive fashion. I think the Cowboys are one of the best teams in the NFC. I still have some questions about them defensively and what are they going to be able to do defensively. But with Ezekiel Elliott, you can keep your defense off the field. He'll have a big game this weekend. I don't think Odell Beckham is in the lineup for the Giants, and that significantly hurts their offense. Eli Manning is an above-average quarterback when he has his receiver, Odell Beckham Jr. When he doesn't have him, he falls to average or below average. He throws a lot of interceptions. So I do like the Cowboys big, 27-17. I think Dak Prescott continues to take the next step to elite status as a quarterback, and I do believe he will be elite because he has the weapons, Des Bryant, obviously Ezekiel Elliott, and then he has the best offensive line in football. So he's going to have time to be able to survey the field and get the job done. So for Cowboy fans, the only question mark I have for your ball club is what you're able to do defensively. Are you going to be able to get pressure on quarterbacks, stop the run, things of that nature? Without Zeke, with Zeke, I had them at 4-2. I still have them at 4-2, to be honest. I don't think there's going to be that much of a drop off because I believe in those 6 games, Dak is going to be able to raise his level of play and carry his squad. And then once Zeke comes back for that playoff run, he's going to be fresh. He's going to have great legs down the stretch, and they're going to be a beast to contend with. Again, defensively is the only question that we have about the Cowboys. And the other matchup, let's get to the other matchup I wanted to get your predictions on. Big time matchup, Seattle. The Seahawks go to Lambeau Field and open up against the Green Bay Packers. Javon, how do you see that matchup? How do you see that matchup going?
Another interesting NFC matchup. We just talked about the Giants and the Cowboys being a great rivalry. I think the Seahawks and the Packers is a really, really good game. I think it's a really good rivalry. Aaron Rodgers is clearly one of the top 2, 3 quarterbacks in the league. There's a contingent of folks that feel that Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback. And based on what we saw from Tom Brady in this opening game, this initial game, I wouldn't be surprised if there's more people that feel like Aaron Rodgers is a clear cut number one. To me, Tom Brady is still the top quarterback until he gets knocked off his perch. But
What Michigan
anytime,
fan wouldn't say that?
well, listen, I think the Super Bowl rings, I think the Super Bowl rings speak louder than his alma mater. But I truly believe the Seattle Seahawks have something to prove this year. There's been much talk about how their defense isn't quite the same. There's been talk about how the chemistry inside that locker room hasn't been the same since they went to the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl, and then they, of course, lost the Super Bowl by electing to throw on the 1 yard line. So I think that Pete Carroll has that team refocused. They have one of the best defensive lines in the league. You got Frank Clark, Cliff Averill, and then of course you have a great secondary. So I picked the Seattle Seahawks to go into Lambeau and upset the Green Bay Packers. If you take a look at how the Packers have started slow the past couple years, And last year, they had to win numerous games just to be able to get into the playoffs. I think the Packers are once again going to start slow. And I think with the motivated Seattle Seahawks team, I think Russell Wilson has always been underrated. He's always a guy that has something to prove. And let's be honest, he's married to Sierra now, so he's getting a little bit of loving on the side from his wife. So he doesn't have a lot of that pent up frustration that maybe he had before. So I picked the Seattle Seahawks to go in. I picked the Seattle Seahawks to go into Lambeau and come out with the victory as the Legion of Boom will reestablish themselves as one of the top secondaries in the league.
I love the Legion of Boom. Sean, give me your take on that matchup. Seattle at Green Bay.
I have Seattle's defense stifling Aaron Rodgers in game one. I have the Packers losing to the tune of 21-13. Um, I think with that already stout defensive line, when we talk about the trade that was recently made with the New York Jets to even bolster their defensive
Huge.
line further, the pass rush, their play against the run, and let's not act like Aaron Rodgers' offensive line was doing a great job through about the first 8 games of last year. They ran the table at the end, but let's not forget that everybody was starting to write off the Packers. They were having a horrible first half. Their protection was horrible. He was getting blindsided. The fumbles were being forced. He was getting rushed out of the pocket. He didn't have the same time to evaluate the field. You have that, and you have a perfect storm of the defensive line and the kind of coverage that the Legion of Boom can hold and the kind of punishment they can dish out even when you do catch the ball. You add that with a locker room that's galvanizing around Bennett right now, having almost got his brains blown out in Las Vegas. Okay, you have chemistry issues, but when traumatic things happen, you find locker rooms getting a lot more close knit. And I think you have an emotional team going into Lambeau, and although I don't think they'll run the ball very well, I think Russell Wilson's movement and his accuracy late in the game will ultimately pull them apart, and I see 21-13 for Seattle.
I'm going to go with Green Bay, 21-17. Let's quickly get these college games in here, and then we'll get out of here tonight. First of all, we have a Category 5 hurricane headed straight for South Florida. So I want to send my thoughts and prayers to those individuals,
Absolutely.
those folks down there. I mean, it is
Absolutely.
a major hurricane, and all the college teams, the programs have canceled their games that they were supposed to play in Florida. Florida State canceled theirs today as well. So I do want to give our
I
thoughts and
think
prayers
Florida
with those
State fans might even
individuals.
be happy about that.
Hey, maybe they are. Maybe they are. So we got some big matchups. Let's start, Javon, with Stanford at USC. Who are you picking in that matchup?
I'm gonna pick the USC Trojans this year, but I do so with caution. Stanford has won 7 out of the last 9 matchups,
Yes.
and to be honest, they physically dominated the USC Trojans at the line of scrimmage.
Right.
Dave, first it was Jim Harbaugh, then it was David Shaw. So I think Stanford has the toughness. I think they have the grit to go into USC and get a victory. However, I think Sam Darnold is the X factor here.
Mm,
Sam Darnold is a special quarterback. He had a difficult week one, didn't produce like many thought he would produce, but I've seen enough to know when a guy has that it factor, he has the tangibles and he has the intangibles. I
mm,
think USC slept on Western Michigan, a team that went to the Cotton Bowl last year and lost to the Wisconsin Badgers.
right.
They still had a lot of talent that was held over from last year. And so I think they caught USC by surprise a little bit. The Stanford Cardinal won't do that. So, on the basis of talent and a better quarterback, I'm going to pick the USC Trojans to defeat the Stanford Cardinals this weekend.
I'm going to pick USC 35, Stanford 31. Sam Darnold's the difference. He will lead the Trojans down the field for a last drive type of victory. Sean, do you have a pick for that
Yeah,
game,
I'm
Stanford
Stanford.
USC?
I had Stanford 33-28. I know they're coming in number 14 against the
Mm,
number 6 seed. I think USC stumbled in game one against West Michigan.
mm.
They were 28-point favorites. You know, you're going 28-28 going into the fourth quarter.
Right,
Sam Darnold did not have a touchdown pass at all. I think, you know, you look at the running back play. I think Stanford has the edge with Bryce Love. You know, he played well in week one, had 180 yards, albeit against Rice.
mm,
You know, played well. And they had 2 extra days of rest. They have 8 starters returning on both sides of the ball. And I ultimately think Stanford, having won, you know, the going for their fourth straight win against them. They also have a mental edge. And I really see Stanford coming out on top 33-28.
gotcha. The big matchup of the weekend: Oklahoma at Ohio State. Javon, what do you say about that?
This is an interesting matchup. And I believe it's so interesting to me because watching Ohio State in week one against Indiana, now granted, it was on the road, it was on a Thursday night against a team that could put up some points in Indiana. I think defensively, Indiana played a lot better than any of us would have anticipated. But it took Ohio State a good 3 quarters to really kick it into gear. But when they did kick it into gear, clearly the explosiveness of their athletes was the difference. They found a great true freshman, J.K. Dobbins, freshman back out of Texas that has a lot of wiggle to his game. He seems like he could be a playmaker from that running back position for the Ohio State Buckeyes, but I wasn't overly impressed with JT Barrett's ability to throw the ball.
Right.
This is his 5th year in that Ohio State system, and yet there's still times where I'm just uncertain about whether he can throw the ball accurately downfield. But with that said, I do like the Ohio State Buckeyes in this game simply because they're at home. And last year, they physically dominated
Hmm.
Oklahoma on their home field. They had Baker Mayfield. Of course, they had Joe Mixon. They had Samaje Perine, and they had Dede Westbrook. This year, Oklahoma doesn't have Joe Mixon. And they don't have Dede Westbrook. Yes, they still have Baker Mayfield, but I think that atmosphere in Columbus is going to be a little bit too much for them to overcome. So I'm picking the Buckeyes as much as it pains me to do so. I am picking them to get the victory over Oklahoma. I think it'll be closer than it was last year. Ohio State won 45-24 last year. So this year I think it'll be a lot closer, but I think Ohio State will pull away late and it could be as much as a 10-point victory.
I'm gonna go with Oklahoma, the Sooners, in an upset, a revenge game for them. Baker Mayfield, I think he's just a better quarterback than JT Barrett. Uh, it's funny because I think Ohio State has more weapons. They're at home. I think Ohio State has the better defense. I think Ohio State has the better special teams. But I feel a Virginia Tech going into the horseshoe, getting an upset victory. I feel like one of
Mhm.
those. And the guy that would lead Oklahoma to doing that is Baker Mayfield. And the year that they went to Rocky Top at Tennessee and beat Tennessee on the road. Um, I love the guts and the guile of a Baker Mayfield. I love Oklahoma defensively. I was really impressed with their defensive line. They got some big boys up there. They did some a good job recruiting some JC guys, and those big guys up front. I think they're going to be very difficult to move. Obviously, Ohio State's defensive line is one of the tops in the country, so they're going to have to get pressure on Baker Mayfield. But I think he's going to make a couple of throws in that fourth quarter to be able to inch past Ohio State. Sean, do you have a pick for that game?
I do. I have Oklahoma winning this game as well. You know, you look at UTEP the game Baker Mayfield had. He was 19 for 20, 329 yards, 3 TDs, and he sat out the second half.
Right.
You couple that with the fact that the Ohio State, I'm only saying that to mess with Javon, a Michigan fan, the Ohio State Buckeyes, they're vulnerable in their secondary. I mean, you look at Indiana throwing for 410 yards, 3 touchdowns against them, albeit they weren't a lot of big plays. I think they may have averaged 5 yards a pass or something like that, and they held them to 37 yards on the ground. But I think they're you couple that with the fact that Oklahoma has the best offensive line in the country, and a lot of people are boasting about that. They have Orlando Brown, offensive tackle. I think even though Baker Mayfield last year, I think they picked him twice. I think they won by 21 points. Right. But I don't see that happening this year. I think Baker Mayfield will be the difference. I agree with Javon that Barrett struggles with the deep ball. And I don't think they're going to be able to get a lot of big plays. And even though they have a great defensive line, I think offensive line of Oklahoma is going to keep them at bay. And Baker Mayfield will be the difference as well.
Without analysis. Go ahead.
Kev, before we move on, I do want to say this. Ohio State has one of the better defensive lines that we've seen in college football over the past 10 years.
Yes, sir.
Tyquan Lewis, Nick Bosa, these guys, Sam Hubbard, they're going to be getting after Baker Mayfield. And Baker Mayfield, one of his strengths is the ability to improvise in and outside the pocket. But the pressure that this defensive line is going to be able to ratchet up, I think is going to be the difference in this game. If Baker Mayfield can find a way to, again, make plays outside of the pocket and work some of that magic that he's known for, then Oklahoma will have a shot. But I just think that defensive line is too dominant. And that's, regardless to how good Oklahoma's offensive line is.
I think with the amount of pressure that Ohio State puts on, I think, they like to blitz as well. You look at the tight end play, from Oklahoma, Andrews, and then their Kentucky transfer, who's kind of slight of build, but very fast, big playability. I think they might be able to control the middle of the field against that kind of play.
Let's without the analysis, just give me a score. We got Auburn at Clemson. Javon, what do you have in that matchup? Just a score.
I got the Clemson Tigers defeating the Auburn Tigers 35-24.
35-24 Clemson. And then Sean, what do you have for that matchup? Just a score.
I have Clemson winning 24-21.
I have Clemson in that game as well. I'm going 21-17 in a defensive struggle. That's all we have for you today. This is episode 12 of Off the Bench. We will be back with you next week. Again, thoughts and prayers to those individuals down there in South Florida, all of Florida, all the way up the eastern coast there, South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina. Please stay safe, evacuate if you have got the evacuation.
And the recovering Houstonians and folks out of Louisiana, and the families, the displaced families, and all the tragedy that's happened as a result of natural disaster. Prayers go out to all those people.
Absolutely.
And a special shout out, co-worker and friend Chris Hicks will be going down to Houston in an effort to help with the relief efforts. So want to send our thoughts and prayers with him as well as he goes down and tries to make a difference. And tries to make a difference for those folks down there. We'll be handing out care packages and seeing what he can do to offer his help on behalf of the folks here in California that can't get there, but really looking out for those people in Houston. So thoughts and prayers with him, and safe journeys and travels as he goes down to Houston.
Yes.
All right. Signing off. Enjoy the sports action this weekend, and we'll be back with you next week.
Be blessed.
Peace.